You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 208 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. Now, we're heading over the Irish Sea again today to meet Tipperary beef and sheep farmer and farming podcaster, Noel Clancy. And it was through his podcast, Out the Gap, that I first got to know Noel in the first place. Out the Gap is a monthly podcast recorded on location with farmers across Ireland, showcasing food and farming stories across the island nation. And before I say anything else, I just recommend, if you're listening to this podcast, which you are, please subscribe to Out the Gap. Go and check out that podcast as well, because I'm just a person. I'm a massive fan of everything that Noel has been doing over time and continues to do, profiling some really fascinating farmers across Ireland. So, Noel, welcome to this podcast. Welcome to Meet the Farmers. Thank you for coming on. How are you doing over there in Tipperary?
I'm very good. I'm just after downing a coffee here, and I've just finished reading a Mr. Men book. So I have the youngest end of the household got to bed.
Which Mr. Men book, out of interest?
Oh, it was Mr. Men at bedtime. Yeah, it was a good read. There's some fairly thick, heavy messages there in the background.
Nice. Let's start straight away at home for you then. Tell us a little bit about the farm and what you've got going on.
Yeah, so I live in South Tipperary, so it's a fairly strong agricultural county down kind of in the South Midlands of Ireland, and we would be in a big dairy area, not so much beef and sheep, but quite good land, and it would be what they call horsey country. So we'd be very near Coolmore Stud, because there's a lot of limestone land in our area. It's kind of a famed area for raising thoroughbreds, because apparently it's very good for their bone development and everything. So our area would be very well known for that. So milk, I suppose, milk and horses, Tipperary would be known for. And really, there's an area to kind of the west of us, from where I am, back towards the west of the country, and that would be, I suppose, known as the Golden Vale. So it would be a really well-known, the kind of really one of the dairy heartlands of Ireland, I suppose. But we have suckler cows and sheep, pedigree Pole Dorsets, and then crossbred sheep as well, and spring calf and suckler cows. And we finish most of the animals to either lamb or beef, and we sell maybe a small amount live, but most of them would be finished, bar some for breeding. And yeah, so I do a few other things as well. Do a bit of have a bit of relief milking that I do for a number of people over a long number of years. So I keep my hand in that way with cows and a few other things going on as well.
Yeah, which Sarah said, it certainly must help with when you're going out onto other farms, speaking to people, having that breadth of sort of practical knowledge on the ground as well.
Yeah, sure. I suppose I've done a good few things now over the years, different jobs, and I suppose it's definitely a help to, you can break the ice with people or whatever. So it is, you can speak their language, I suppose. So that's a help. Yeah.
Yeah. So what about your life growing up? Let's go back to the beginning. And I'm interested to see really where the farming influence was, and when you knew that you wanted agriculture to be part of your life. And I'm going to say part of your life here, because again, through the podcasting, you're involved in ag in different ways as well.
Yeah, I suppose I would have always been interested in farming growing up. My parents would be very good stock people, but they're also quite busy off farm. My mother was a great stock person. Like growing up, she would have, my father was gone a lot, so she would have done a lot of and I was the youngest of the family, so I would be, my next brother up was about 5 or 6 years older than me, so I would have been with her a lot, and I have early memories of, being put in a kind of a duffel coat over in the corner while she was feeding stock or something. So she was a great woman that way, really good stock person, very, very good with animals and that. And I suppose we would have been given a few animals of our own when we're whatever age, I suppose, an age where we had some interest and got a few lambs to keep or whatever else. And sure, we had a bit of an interest from there, but never really pushed, I suppose, down the farming route as such. Like never forced. We always did some work on the farm, but never forced down the route of going down to farming or whatever. I originally actually didn't really do agriculture in college. I did countryside management there. So that's what I kind of veered down that route. And then I kind of swung back into ag and went back to education a bit later in life. Then again, I wasn't a very good student in school. So just ordinary mainstream school didn't suit me at all. So
we all peak at different times.
Yeah, well, maybe so, but I just even now, if I prefer to pick stones for a week now than spend a day in secondary school. Just when I think back on the format of it here, just didn't really suit me anyway. So, but having said that, when I was in college, whatever later, I was happy out. I suppose I felt I was doing something maybe that I was more interested in myself. But having said that, when you look back now years later, you would say, yeah, you wish, when you waste time in secondary school or something, when you look back on it, you say, well, like, wasn't that a complete waste of time? When you were there, you might as well have been doing something constructive, but that's hindsight is a great thing, as they say.
Definitely is. It definitely is. This episode is being supported by our primary sponsor, A-Plan Rural. Why did I want to collaborate with A-Plan Rural? Well, having got to know them, their team shares my passion for giving a voice to farmers, and we are both driven to raise the profile of farming voices to a wider audience. So it seemed quite a good fit. Quite frankly, together we will be able to do a lot more. A-Plan Rural do a lot of work on social media themselves, sharing farming accounts and farming stories. They have a rural community blog which shares farmers' experiences, and they also support a growing number of initiatives that champion UK farmers, including this podcast. So a big thank you to A-Plan Rural for supporting Meet the Farmers. Just sticking with the farm itself, some listeners might be aware, I suppose, in the general news, certainly on this side of the Irish Sea, of what's going on in Ireland in terms of discussions of potential sort of reduced stock numbers overall. I'm speaking especially for the dairy industry here, but I don't actually know to the extent to which that's affecting sheep and beef more especially, I would have thought. But just run us through some of the challenges that you face as a farm, and also maybe in reference to that sort of wider issue.
Well, there's a debate, I suppose, that at the moment was a contentious one with the suckler beef cows. And I suppose for anyone that's listening that doesn't know what a suckler cow is, she's a cow that has a calf and would rear her calf with her for maybe 6 or 7 months, maybe 8 months before they're weaned, and they would go for beef. But I suppose they would be the low profit sector in Irish farming. And I suppose there's a debate there that the suckler numbers are contracting every year with the age profile of the beef farmers. So there might be scope there to help the dairy end of things, that it might allow them to maybe keep their numbers up a bit if the suckler cow numbers contract a bit. But the other side of the debate is, I suppose, the dairy farms are the more intensive farms in country. So therefore, I suppose they're more prone to environmental issues, whatever, due to stocking rate or fertilizer rate, whatever, because everything, they're usually more highly stocked and they're usually using more artificial fertilizer as well. So there's a lot of things like that coming down the tracks, a lot of pressures on people. There's also now a scramble for land because some dairy people who want to stay at the numbers they are, the organic nitrogen limits are being lowered, or it looks like they're going to be lowered. So they're going to either have to reduce their cow numbers or farm more land. And that has a knock-on effect on the beef or the sheep sector or something, because the dairy farmers have better capacity to pay for the rental land. So if they will probably push it up, and that's just, those new regulations will cause that to happen inevitably. And that'll probably stop the tillage people, that'll knock the tillage beef or sheep people out of the picture inadvertently. So because they can't probably go to the same level they haven't the same power behind them, I suppose, money-wise. So you have a whole series of effects from that, just from the whole idea of reducing the nitrogen or the organic nitrogen.
And I mean, you speak to quite a few different farmers in different sectors. So what's your feeling of sentiment on the ground of how farmers are feeling at the moment?
I think they feel very I suppose attacked at all angles. Maybe is definitely, especially I suppose if you're on social media and stuff, depending on who you're looking at or who you're talking to or what you're reading. But there's definitely attacks there for kind of unfairly. I think people feel they're a bit unfairly attacked, as someone was pointing out to me lately, like the fact that you can still I could fly over to meet you in the morning, and probably if I booked it a few weeks in advance, I could fly very cheaply. I could probably fly to England as cheap as I could get the train to the southwest of Ireland, and like that doesn't make any sense. So I think people feel there's a bit of, that everybody should. I don't think any farmer is saying that they don't have responsibility or whatever, or that they don't have an impact, but I think they feel that they might be unfairly tarnished.
Yeah,
and that it's not equal.
On the farming side, where do you see your farm going in terms of numbers, in terms of what you're doing? Because obviously you wear a number of different hats, but that's also obviously a key part of what you do.
Well, I think sometimes as farmers we can go on the defensive a bit too much. So I think we have to acknowledge that we've caused. Like, I mean, I was only saying to the kids today, it struck me, we're just down the farm this evening with 3 kids, and we're just down to give the dogs a run. And one of them, our eldest, actually said he'd never seen a hare on the farm.
Okay.
And we would have even said it lately, like when I was small, we would have seen, there was loads of hares around. I can remember loads of times seeing leverets, either on our own land or in our neighbour's land. And the basic thing, I suppose, in the 30, 40 years there's been a massive change, I suppose, in land use, more intensification and everything else. And I suppose grass graze down more and more paddock systems, like a major change in our area since when I was small, even hedgerows, everything. And like that was a fairly stark one. So like that definitely shows, and our own farm was no different. Like we would have been, I suppose, went down receded a lot of our place wouldn't have been receded. So we would have some old pasture down the bottom of the farm, but we would have some receded pasture too, a lot of fairly newish lays. And yeah, like definitely you will not see the variety of, even walking through them in the summer's evening, because you don't have the variety of little wildflowers or anything like that. You've more perennial ryegrass and that kind of thing. You don't have to be an environmentalist or whatever they call it, a wildlife biologist, to see that there's a fairly stark difference. But then again, you get a lot more grazings off them, so it's a trade-off. I suppose people were pushed there. 70s, 80s, everything was, push everything. Another was it? What was the old one? Another cow, another sow, another acre under the plough. Yeah. Isn't that the old? Yeah, and all this kind of thing. So, but I mean, we can't obviously blame. But there was a lot of policy shoved everybody in that direction. And now I suppose the whole cheap food thing. Yeah, it's coming home to roost a bit. Like I was talking to our local butcher today. I was just in the shop and we were passing from their farm, and I called in to get a few bits and pieces. And he was telling me that they can't actually, for coleslaw, they can't. This is a random fact now, but they can't get. There's no Irish cabbage supplier for coleslaw anymore.
Really? That is. I enjoy a random fact. Okay.
In a country like Ireland, I mean, I was just saying to him, isn't it, like this is totally. Has to be a disaster. Like in 10 years' time, we're going to look back and wonder, like, why did we let all the horticulture industry die a death in this country? And the vegetable producers are dropping by the wayside regularly in this country. It's a shame. Like, isn't that? It's a mad thing. Like a country like Ireland, where you can easily grow a product like cabbage, and yet they're importing it now for the coleslaw. He said.
Let's turn towards the podcast, Out the Gap. How did it start? It's a classic podcaster question, but how did it start? When did it start as well?
It started in 2020, just actually at the start of COVID, so it wasn't great. And the idea I had tried, always listen to people anyway, various podcasts, whatever, and there wasn't really anybody doing. I like the idea of recording it in person with people, and generally speaking, I suppose I would find there'd be very few people that I wouldn't be able to get on with in person, shall we say. So I said my idea was that I would not do a major amount, that I'd do maybe one a month, and I would put a good effort into it and go out and meet the person rather than doing it on Zoom or whatever.
Yep, that's how this podcast started as well. Yep.
Yeah, there is downsides to that, because obviously you can't there's loads of interesting people you could talk to in other countries, but you can't do
Yeah.
that if you want to meet them in person, or if you do, you better get a good sponsor.
Exactly. And have enough time to actually do that as well.
Exactly. So it would be great to do that. But yeah, so that was the whole idea. And I rang somebody and I asked them, would it be okay if we went up to their hill farm? And they were actually Galloway breeders up in the Knockby Down Mountains. And I said, I don't really know what I'm doing or whatever, but would you mind if we messed around and did a bit of recording so could we put some kind of a first podcast together and see what it turned out like. And I told them the way it wasn't going to be it's not going to be no razzmatazz, no music or anything like that, just kind of sounds of the farm or the place or the wind or whatever. And sure, went from there. Then I suppose then it kind of died a bit of a death because I couldn't go to call to anybody for a while because of COVID. And then it got going, and sure, people seem to like. Loads of different people have been on it from around the country, and people seem to like the fact that number one, that it's recorded in person, and they like the fact they can hear the sounds of the animals or whether it's cows grazing or tractors in the background or whatever. They really seem to like that. So I've went all over the country really so far. So like as I say, I'm not putting out about a dozen a year, so not doing a major amount, but trying to put reasonably good effort into them and trying to go talk to some people as well who are not, I suppose, very well known or whatever, but just people I might have come across somewhere or heard something about and thought they might be interesting. And some of those people like have great things to say, when you give them a platform. And I usually try to keep them about an hour, and I don't edit out much or whatever. So it's people seem to like it. I don't know. They tell me they like the sounds of it, and they like the feel. They tell me you feel like they're walking with us or whatever when we're recording or where we are, that they can feel they're nearly there. So they seem to, I don't know, they just seem to like it. But the only thing I'm missing is a sexy BBC accent. A terribly flat Tipperary accent.
I think people like your accent. I think it's There's certainly a lot of people on this side of the RSC who would be very, very jealous of your accent.
Maybe, yeah. Well, if you're in Ireland, I don't have an accent, but when you're somewhere else, you might. When I was in England there for a while and down in Devon, and I used to have to speak very slowly. Because nobody could understand what I was saying. I'm probably even talking fast tonight, but I used to speak very fast. But people seem to like it anyway. I mean, there's no major razzmatazz with it. As I say, I don't have any theme music or anything like that. It's very, very low key, but people seem to like the fact.
Yeah, and you have profiled some really fascinating individuals, and you sort of referenced that a little bit there. But how do you decide? Because obviously you're traveling to each individual farm. How do you decide who to profile? And how do you decide who to profile? And I suppose the practicality of getting there and everything else, how do you plan that around everything else you do?
So I suppose I would contact. I'd contact. I mean, I might read something about somebody or hear about somebody, and I'd say, God, or someone might say to me, this person would be brilliant to talk to, maybe, or whatever. So like I even ended up there doing one. We did it in a bakery. It's one of the bakery in the Waterford border, just the Waterford, down the Waterford coast, south coast of Ireland.
Yeah,
and they were like cooking with they're cooking an old Scotch brick oven or whatever. It's really interesting. We got to climb into the oven and everything. We were recording it, and it was built by a guy from Scotland come over to build it, and that wasn't really, I suppose, it was egg related, but it wasn't. And there's somebody, I've read something about their place, and I rang them and I asked them would it be okay to call, and somebody took a message, and I didn't hear for about 6 months, and then somebody rang back and said, oh, you left a message there with such and such, and do you want to come down or whatever? And I said, oh yeah, that was like months ago. So we went down. It was absolutely fascinating. She was a brilliant character. So it was really interesting. But I would take notes. No more than yourself, probably. You'd come across people, and I suppose some people I've went to would not be known at all really anywhere, but they've just been. It's nice maybe to give them a platform, and they're happy once you get them talking. They're very happy to talk about their place and their connection with the past generations that maybe farmed the place or worked in the same business or whatever. So I suppose there's a massive amount of people you could call to, but I try and keep a kind of a mix, I suppose, if I can, mix of different people. So as much as possible anyway, but or different backgrounds or whatever else. But I don't know, people seem to like the mix anyway, but Some people seem to like even the older people, I suppose, they love hearing the recollections of older people particularly. That seems to strike a chord with certain people.
Yeah, no, for sure. Meet the Farmers is brought to you by RuralPod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialise in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organisations and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. RuralPod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast. You're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk. What role do you think that podcasts have, I suppose, moving forward in terms of telling farming stories, and why is it important, do you think, that this particular media continues to be used to tell farming stories?
I think, it's the fact that with a podcast, I suppose you haven't really a time constraint. Now, obviously, you're not going to spend 3 hours, maybe.
I don't know, you might. There are people who make podcasts that long.
There are ones that, and generally I wouldn't be a major. I like things that are maybe under an hour if I can. I think that would be my personal thing. But I think people like the fact, and they tell me as well, they like the idea that, I suppose, they get I always say to them, you have time to tell your story. So it's not like if you have a radio program or something calls out, there is some here and there's some in the UK or whatever, that some very good ones like in BBC and everything, but still there's a kind of a time constraint there. And that's a skill, obviously, in itself, to tell somebody's story in 10 minutes or whatever, but you're losing a lot too. Whereas if they're not rushed, or you're maybe walking or talking with somebody, I think it's a great platform to get the full story out for people to listen to. So I think that's why podcasts are really good. Now, I mean, some people tell me they don't listen to podcasts, and that's just the way it is. They've never have, and they just listen to radio or whatever, and that's what they like listening to.
There's fewer and fewer of them though now.
Probably, yeah. My local mechanic told me the other day, he said, "Are you still at that podcast?" And I said, "I am, yeah." I said, and he said, "Sure, who'd have time to listen to that?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "You don't have to listen to it." I said, "That's the beauty of it." But so, yeah, I don't think I think not too many sit off on their armchair, maybe listen to podcasts. Now, sometimes I would, but especially in the winter time. But most people, I think, listen on the go or listen driving. I think they're great driving.
Yeah, no, completely.
They're a great thing to listen to.
Yeah. What do you most enjoy about producing it?
What do I enjoy about producing it? I suppose I like I suppose people are putting a bit of, like, I don't have any media background at all, so whatsoever. So I suppose I like the fact that, if someone puts their trust maybe in you, which they are doing, like, especially maybe somebody is not that well known or whatever, and they put their trust that you're going to, I mean, fair enough, it's probably easier when you have a bank of stuff, because you can send them, as you know yourself, you can send them some recent ones or something, and then they say, oh, okay, this is the way he does it, or this is the way, I like the way it's very natural or whatever, and then they listen to that and they're kind of happier maybe then. Whereas maybe when you're starting out, it's not as easy for people because they don't know what the hell you're going to do. Yeah, probably. So people now, because they know me or whatever, they seem very happy. I was at a local agricultural show there not so long ago. Just people shouting out the gaff at me.
Brilliant.
As I was walking up, it's quite funny. But yeah, so they know it obviously, and then, but I like the fact that, very, you get the feedback from the person that they're very happy the way the thing comes across, and they're happy the way the story was told, even though they're the ones, basically, you might be steering it, but they're essentially telling their own story, what they're doing or where they came from, and I think the satisfaction in that they might ring you after a couple of weeks or something and say, they're really happy, they got great feedback from it and they're delighted they did it, and I think that's great to hear. But it's also nice to give people, as somebody said, now it's a terrible phrase, but the ordinary people or whatever, like, rather than some high profile person or whatever, it's nice to give somebody who's working there on the side of a hill somewhere or whatever a chance to be heard, like in loads of different countries or whatever else, or just even in their own country, give them the platform and give them the time to tell their story. And I think that's a nice thing to be able to do.
Yeah, no, completely. I think for me, it's one of the best things about podcasting. Just a little more about our primary sponsor, A-Plan Rural. They provide bespoke insurance cover for farms and estates. This could be for anything from tractors and machinery to a new exciting diversification venture. So for more information, visit aplan.co.uk/rural. That's aplan.co.uk/rural. What have you got coming up over the next few months?
What have we got coming up? I'm doing one actually. I'm going recording in the west of Ireland, right on the west coast there next week. We're doing
Fantastic.
one with a wool spinner. Right, actually up beside Ireland's, actually right at the edge of Ireland's only fjord, Tipperary Fjord, on the border of Mayo and Galway in Connemara. So that's where I'm actually going next week. So it's a bit of a spin.
It'll be an amazing trip.
Yeah, so that's where I'm going next week, and that'll be for our August episode. And the episode after that, which I was supposed to get around to, I'm going cycling with a group of retirees on vintage bikes, which I was supposed to do a couple of weeks ago, but between one thing and another, our schedules clashed. So they're a group of, what do they call themselves? I think they call themselves vintage cyclists. So they cycle on old High style bikes around the Midlands of Ireland. They do various trips, and they're a group of generally retired people. So I'm going out with them on some kind of an adventure. It's not fully squared up yet what we're doing, but we're going anyway. So that should be something different as well. Yeah, there's a mixture of people like retired farmers, a mixture of people. Yeah, they're the next few anyway. And there's several more lined up there as well. There's a sheep dairy, and we're going to do something with them. Now that's not fully pinpointed down yet, but we're doing something towards the end of the summer with them anyway. There's loads of people to talk to, so just the time to get them all is the problem. But that's a good complaint.
Yeah, no, there are indeed. Where would you like the podcast to sort of be in maybe a couple of years' time? Are there particular stories, kinds of stories that you'd like to cover? Are you keeping an open mind for who comes along?
Yeah, no, to keep it, I suppose, kind of keep a mix on it as much as possible. People tell me they like the mix. Like some people don't. There's people that don't listen to all the episodes. They might just pick one they like or whatever, which is fine, obviously, too. I suppose just to keep a mix on it. I've done bits and pieces with kids, and they can be really, really, really fun there as well. Yeah. At times they've done stuff at shows and stuff like that, little bits and pieces, and they can be really, because they're so honest and everything, they can be quite endearing or whatever. I know they could say anything too, but yeah, it would probably be nice to do a bit more of that, maybe with some of those kind of groups, or whatever. I'm involved with the thing, yeah, same as the UK, the Farmer Time thing, where you're teamed up with a school and or a school class or whatever for the year, and yeah, I talk to those fairly regularly. A school in Dublin, and that gives you great insight there. But it'd be kind of cool maybe to do something with some of those or something down on the farm, maybe, or something like that. Sometime,
yeah,
maybe.
Sounds good.
So they're obviously working with children now. There's other legal things you have to get signed up.
Yes.
It's not as easy as it once was. So that's gone tricky, I suppose, nowadays as well. You have to be careful. But yeah, I would like to just keep a mix on the thing, I suppose. Try and keep a good mix. Sometimes people would contact me with you should talk to this person, or you should talk to that person. But when you're only doing maybe a dozen a year, that's not that many, I suppose. But then I suppose if I try and put a good bit of effort into them, and they take a bit of time, like, so just to go out when you're going out to meet the people. So yeah, I suppose I'd like to as many. The problem with the whole podcast thing is there's so many out there, isn't there? And people
there are now
a few they like, and there are, yeah. So I suppose whether you're trying to, I don't know, word of mouth, I think is the best thing, isn't it? If somebody says they like this, so why don't you listen to this, whatever, that's probably the best. Once people enjoy it, and I enjoy recording them, so once people enjoyed them. And the one thing when I started was that I didn't want to try and do loads, so I wanted to do it and find it enjoyable or whatever, because I have other things going on as well. So I didn't want to be have this constant thing coming down the tracks. We're like, oh, where am I going to go, or what am I going to do, or whatever. So the fact it's only one a month is not bad that way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Another shout out to listeners of this podcast. Please do go and check out The Gap as soon as you've finished listening to this episode. We're going to start to round things up, and I'm going to ask you the final few questions that we have at the end of the show. The first is, Noel, what would be your message for the public?
I've got the message for the public. Well, one thing I hate is when farmers say, "Oh, we need to educate the public" or whatever. But I really hate that term because it really drives me mad. But I would say to the public that we're very connected, and that even if you've no connection to farming or land or food production, we are intrinsically connected. So if when you go in with your €5, your €10, or your £10 or whatever country you're listening in, and you could throw it over the counter in your local small little deli mart or supermarket or whatever, that to think like, what you're buying with it, and what influence you can have by what you pick out on the shelf. We hear all the talks about organics and everything else, but yet the consumer at the moment does not seem to be backing up all the talk. So I think the consumer there has a great power with where they spend their pound or their euro. And farmers are very flexible people, so if people want food produced in certain ways, then we'll go right ahead and produce it. We're always very flexible. I think even the people think we mightn't be. So we'll produce what the consumer wants.
Yes. And your message to farmers?
I'd say to farmers, get out of the fishbowl, maybe. I think farmers. Even the last person, Catherine Guest, that I was out with there lately, she was saying the same thing, that she was on a recent podcast that, we're terrible people for, going on holidays and ended up on farms and stuff like that, which is all very interesting as well. But, it's great to meet people outside farming as well. One thing I like, I'm involved in GA, so Gaelic football and hurling, coaching and stuff. And I like the fact we go down and you meet people and there's nothing about grass or animals or anything like that, generally speaking. They haven't a clue anyway and they don't want to talk about it, so that's fine. And I play handball in the winter, they're Olympic handball with a group. And again, there's no real talk of farming at it, so it's brilliant. So I think sometimes just to get out of, and maybe sometimes farmers can bark back a bit, and that's probably understandable with the way I suppose all the talk is at the moment of the environment wise and everything. But I think, sometimes take a step back, maybe listen to people a bit more, and also get out of the goldfish bowl, because if even on social media, if you look around, it's people preaching to people within farming the whole time, and like they're not actually reaching very many outside farming at all. So you're kind of going around in circles then, aren't you, a bit? So I think people in farming, maybe we need to get out a bit more outside our own circle and talk to people from other sectors.
Great message. And finally, I mean, I'm going to recommend Out the Gap for this one, but I wonder if there's any more. Your recommendation for a blog, podcast, or social media account to follow, which can be farming, but it doesn't have to be farming. It could be outside of farming as well. Yeah,
it could be. Well, there's a guy there on Instagram, Glenn Egan down in Kerry, himself and his dad. Very honest, kind of a hill farm, but they're absolutely a cheap shepherd, actually. I think they are on Instagram, but you'd see it on YouTube as well. They're guests, they're very raw, honest kind of people, and very humorous as well. His father's a guest character, and I think people like kind of short, lively stuff that's quite honest and good, hard-working people. I think that's a good one to follow, because there's a bit of humor in it as well, and they're great characters. So I'd definitely give them a shout on that one. I found my eldest and myself often tune into them there, and they're very amusing, and they're just honest, good, hardworking people as well.
Fantastic. I'll put that in the show notes. Go and check them out. Go and give them a follow. That's it. Noel, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks very much, Ben. That's great. Thank you.
And and I look forward to listening to the next episode about The Gap. That's it for today. Massive thank you to Noel Clancy for coming on the show. If you haven't already done so, please do like and subscribe to this show wherever you're listening. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Next time we're heading to Wales to meet dairy farmer Gwyndath Thomas. That will be a really good one. So please tune in then. Thanks again to Noel for today and to our primary podcast sponsor, A-Plan Rural Insurance, for supporting the show. Please see the show notes for more information and for any links mentioned today. For now, though, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you will have a great week.